Welcome back to the Liberty Perspective. I'm Joe Marshall. Today I want to continue the show, this part 2 of the show that I'm doing, diving into Dr. David Martin, the popular medical freedom doctor. We kind of left off yesterday after we went through basically how, progressive collectivism at large and progressive collectivists as agents of change are not only trying to change, things today in today's politics, they're trying to change the very fundamentals of what our founding principles are, of how we understand what our founding principles are, how we understand what our individual rights and liberty are, our natural, endowed by our Creator, unalienable rights and liberty are. And not only that, what they're trying to do is they're trying to make us understand these things and comprehend these things from the perspective of the collectivist revolution that's actually targeting them for destruction, that has targeted them for destruction. And they're going back into history. They're changing our history. This is what's been kind of affectionately termed revisionist. It's not revisionist just because, I guess we didn't really remember that was it. No, they're doing it on purpose. It's by design. They're convoluting what our actual founding principles are, what our republic is, what our Constitution is, and when these progressives get in power, and you have things, progressive policies and in power and progressive institutions such as judicial supremacy. People might not even understand what judicial supremacy is, but it's not the Constitution, actually, according to judicial supremacy, which has legal precedent in human rights law and in our legal system today. That it's not actually the Constitution that's the supreme law of our land. It's how the Supreme Court or judges interpret what's in the Constitution that is actually the supreme law. And they're going to interpret it according to the needs of today, not according to some society that's dead and gone. That's according to Brennan. Brennan was the Supreme Court justice who wrote that kind of shit. He has a whole institution in his name now where they're going out there, the whole living document kind of thing. Well, now we have a living history where these people are coming in and they're undermining what our founding principles are by assaulting and attacking and convoluting the premise upon which our founding principles were deciphered by our founders, going after people like John Locke, Adam Smith, and twisting it all around so that we understand it according to the collectivist revolution, according to Marxism, which is definitely a vanguard aspect of the revolution, right? Against our liberty, against our freedom, against our free society, any free society. But anyways, I kind of left off on that. I want to go back in and kind of go over something that we we're going over a little bit, where I was kind of showing you with a Marxist interpretation, which is similar or parallel to, consistent with anyways, to what Dr. David Martin is saying about what Dr. Martin is saying, what Adam Smith was saying. We got this Richard Wolff guy, right? You can see he was saying that Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, he said that the toil and trouble needed to produce it. The toil and trouble needed to produce it. And he's got that in quotes. But anyways, just so that we can, I got the paragraph where that was taken, where the word toil is 4 times in the Wealth of Nations. Okay, let's go right to the Wealth of Nations. Let me see. I'm going to put the word toil in there. Yeah, 5 times. 5 times right there. You can't see it, but it says 5 times. And let me see if we can go down to 1. No, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the fifth one's pretty much down towards closer to the end, where he's talking about the toil of the Roman army having to carry their armor. So it doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about here, right? But you can see the toil needed to produce it. The toil and trouble needed to produce it. It's just, here is this toil and trouble for acquiring it. Toil and trouble which it can save himself. Toil of our own body, and then or the goods is purchased by labor as much as what we acquire by the toil. Now, I kind of went over this in the last show, part 1, about where he's getting at. Basically, you know, I'm not a philosopher. I'm not an academic. I'm just reading what the guy's saying, knowing what I know after running a business, you know, for 40 years, and how the basic principles of market forces work, how a free enterprise system, free market system works, if left to be what it is supposed to be, the free exchange of property owned for property desired. You know what I mean? So, but nowhere in that we can see that was actually, it was a misquote, and I didn't kind of clarify exactly what I was looking for in there, as far as he didn't say exactly that he used it in quotes, but I'm not seeing it there, you know. But anyways, and we went down through this revolution, and we kind of left off where Noam Chomsky's interpretation of Locke was the same thing. How they're going back in time, going back in the past, and this has consequences for America. It's not a semantic. It's not a semantic. It's not inconsequential. It's cutting to the bone, is what it is. Okay. See, yeah, that reasonableness of Christianity, Locke. The reasonableness of Christianity being twisted by Noam Chomsky and the progressive, I would say left normally, but it's progressive, or right and left. It's progressive collectivism at large is going back in and changing our history. All of it has targeted our founding principles and our founding republic for destruction. All of them. But so we went down through there. And I got this, that article, I showed you that. Okay, not to mention the Rockefeller Carnegie's play. Yeah, so I'm going back and see how these people are going back into history. How Dr. David Martin has gone back into history, and he's changed he's reconstruing what Adam Smith said. Noam Chomsky's going back, reconstruing what, and academia at large is doing these same things. It's not just these guys. You know what I mean? They're going back and reconstruing what Locke said. And, you know, it's nothing new. It's nothing new, though. Not to mention, it's consistent with all this. It's founding took, Furthermore, Dr. Martin's skewing of Adam Smith is wholly consistent here with Noam Chomsky's, I'll learn how to talk again here, hostility and intentionally convoluting interpretation of John Locke, which is consistent also with what the Rockefeller and Carnegie foundations were doing, as told to us by Norman Dodd back when G. Edward Griffin did his interview of Norman Dodd. There's a little bit here, the 3305, about 5 minutes of this video. I wanted to show you so that where is he? There he is. I'll get it here sooner or later. But I wanted to show you this. Okay, we're going to 3305.
Then time passes, and we are eventually in a war, which would have been World War I. And at that time, they record on their minutes a shocking report.
He's talking about a report and investigation that they did into the Carnegies and the un-American activities kind of thing, that they were agents, collectivist agents, revolutionary, I don't know, communist, collectivist agents, collectivism, agents of collectivism, working in our government and through the Carnegie Foundation. That's what he's talking about.
In which they dispatched to President Wilson a telegram cautioning him to see that the war does not end too quickly. And finally, of course, the war is over. At that time, their interest shifts over to preventing what they call a reversion of life in the United States to what it was prior to 1914, when World War I broke out. And they arrive at that point, they come to the conclusion that to prevent a reversion, we must control education in the United States.
A reversion back to our founding principles, a version away from the progressive advances in policy, a reversion back to what we're closer to our founding principles.
And they realize that that's a pretty big task. So to them, it is too big for them alone, so they approach the Rockefeller Foundation with the suggestion that that portion of education which could be considered domestic be handled by the Rockefeller Foundation, and that portion which is international should be handled by the endowment. And they then decide that the key to the success of these two operations lay in an alteration of the teaching of American history. So they approach 4 of the then most prominent teachers of American history in the country.
You can see that this whole back and reconstruing history, being in control of teaching of the history, isn't a new thing. It isn't a new thing. It's nothing new. It's been around for a while by these progressive elites, these planners, okay?
People like Charles and Mary Bird, and their suggestion to them is, will they alter the manner in which they present this subject, and they get turned down flat. So they then decide that it is necessary for them to do, as they say, build our own stable of historians. And
the revolution builds its own stable of historians. They've been doing this, and it's by design. This is what I'm trying to show you.
And then they approach the Guggenheim Foundation, which specializes in fellowships, and say, when we find young men in the process of studying for doctorates in the field of American history, and we feel that they are the right caliber, will you grant them fellowships on our say-so? And the answer is yes. So under that condition, eventually they assemble 20. And they take this 20 potential teachers of American history to London, and there they're briefed into what is expected of them when, as and if they secure appointments in keeping with the doctorates they will have earned. And that group of 20 historians ultimately becomes the nucleus of the American Historical Association.
The American Historical Association itself. So who do we turn to when our history is misconstrued? And if it's all that we know, we never know that we've been derailed, that what American history has been derailed, and nobody knows anything different than what the derailed history is. And it's been derailed by the revolution. Dr. David Martin's continuing the tradition of Noam Chomsky and the whole of the Carnegie Foundation and Rockefeller Foundation.
And then toward the end of the 1920s, the endowment grants to the American Historical Association $400,000 for a study of our history in a manner which points to what can this country be, can it look forward to in the future. And that culminates in a 7-volume study, the last volume of which is, of course, in essence, a summary of the contents of the other 6. And the essence of the last volume is the future of this country belongs to collectivism administered with characteristic American efficiency. That's the story that ultimately grew out of, and of course was what could have been presented by the members of this congressional committee to the Congress as a whole for just exactly what it said. But they never got to that point.
This is the story that emerged from the minutes of the Carnegie Fund.
That's right.
The Carnegie Endowment
That's
Fund.
right.
And
wanted you to hear that. They've been changing our history. It's not something that I'm making up. It's a real thing. It's a revolution that's been going on out there. It's an ideological revolution. It's a spiritual revolution. It's a mental revolution. It's a physical revolution on all realms of our paradigm. All realms. It's a revolution. And I just wanted to point that out. Okay? So you've got, this is all consistent with David Martin, his reconstruction or deconstruction of history, and then reconstructed it according to the perspective of the revolution against the society targeted for destruction, in this case ours. Noam Chomsky, same thing. Revolutionary collectivism at large, same thing. Carnegie, Rockefeller Foundation, same thing. The historical society itself, established by the revolution against our history. You see what I'm saying? You've got in the Fabian Socialists, this guy, Milton. What do I got? There's other things here that I wanted to show you. Let me see. Is this? This is the one. Is this the one right here? Yeah. I was, I like old books. I've liked old books, and I'm telling you, they're erasing our history. They're going back and they're changing our history as a tactic in the revolution against our society, right? Against America as founded. But I got this book called what was it? The Constitution and Civil Rights. Okay. And this was written. This is guy's name is Milton R. Convitz. Milton R. Convitz. I don't know who he is, but he's in here and he's he's shitting on the whole of our Constitution, really, and the whole thing. But they've been going back, reconstruing our society, our history, there was something in here that I wanted to point out. 1946. This book was written in 1946, so it's nothing new. Columbia University Press. You know, it says this book does not treat of political rights, such as the right to vote, nor does it treat of civil liberties such as those mentioned in the Bill of Rights. Okay? Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, religion, freedom, the right to bear arms, the right to security against unreasonable searches and seizures, security against double jeopardy and excessive bail, the right to trial by jury, security against self-incrimination, and so on. The scope of this book is defined by its title, The Constitution and Civil Rights. Its more technical, limited sense, the term civil rights, as distinguished from political rights and civil rights, refers to the rights of persons, employment, and the accommodations in hotels, restaurants, common carriers, and other places in public accommodations and resorts. The term contemplates the rights enumerated in the Federal Civil Rights Act of 1775. Freedom comes only from law. Okay? It comes only from law. It can be achieved only through Supreme Court overruling earlier precedents, which were decided on the basis of states' rights instead of human rights in 1946. That was 2 years before the Universal Declaration of Human Rights went up. But what I'm saying is, they've been going back and changing what our Constitution is and what our freedom, actual individual rights and liberty are. Now, those civil rights they're talking about, a lot of the Jim Crow laws and stuff like that they're referring to, okay? Because we need laws to protect us from the inherent whiteness or whatever would be the same kind of parallel argument against America's founding principles. I did a series of 3 shows that are in defense of America, and one of them was on the whiteness accusatory. And it's a progressive accusatory that points to progressive policies in American history, such as Jim Crow and, Dred Scott case, which were progressive policies, progressive judicial supremacy interpretations of the Constitution, where it wasn't the actual Constitution that was a supreme law. It was the interpretation of slave owners or pro-slavery judges. That was a progressive court that made that decision. Okay, it was a hostile interpretation of our Constitution. If the Constitution was so philosophically friendly to slavery, the South wouldn't have had to secede. The Confederacy wouldn't have had to secede from the Union and write a constitution of their own that was consistent with slavery. Jim Crow was progressive policies, progressive era, progressive policies. When the schools, when they went into the schools and the segregation of the schools, those were all progressive policies that they were putting into place. That were put into place through progressive era, progressive policies. They were not of our founding principles. But here's another one. This guy here, this guy, Convit's Milton Papers, collection of his papers here. Okay? I got him. He was a Fabian socialist. Philip Guadarlo is another one. This guy here. I found this book, Fathers of the Revolution by Philip Guadala. I don't know how you say his name. But here's a picture of that guy. Okay. Here's an old picture of that guy with Beatrice and Sidney Webb with Sir John Squire and Philip Guadarlo in 1915. That Beatrice and Sidney Webb were basically, along with George Bernard Shaw, basically the founders of the Fabian Socialists, or one of founding members of the Fabian Socialists. Leaders. But what I'm trying to tell you, what I'm trying to tell you here is that this history, when you find an old book, oh wow, I'm going to read about the fathers of the Revolution, of the American Revolution. It's an old book. It's not going to be it's not going to be screwed up. You know, this book was written. The copyright on this book is 1926. 1926. This, well, it was 1924, but this copy, this is a 1926 version of a 1924 book. Okay, and let me just read this. And right at the beginning, he's got this in there. All right. Let me read it to you. This is this Philip Guardia guy. He writes, "Dear H.G. Wells, another Fabian socialist." He writes at the beginning of the book, so much, and this is to tell you how much freaking Kool-Aid these guys were all drinking even back then. So much in this paper that follows was written within sight of your chimneys. So much more in the thought and writing of most persons now living lies in the shadow of something that you have already written or thought. Yeah. For both reasons, I want friendship apart to write your name in the front of this book. May I? Just saying, when you're going out and you're reading history, know what you're reading. Listen to what they're actually saying. And a great number of these books in history going back into the that's progressive era, 1920s, 1940s. I mean, the progressive era started in the early 1800s and went all the way up into the 1970s. You know, really, I mean, they say the New Deal was the end of the progressive era, but it continued with a lot of progressive policies up into the 1970s. Actually, look at Nixon when he took the dollar off made fiat money. You know, it made it official fiat money. But anyways, so it's all consistent. Dr. David Martin, Noam Chomsky, he's consistent with the larger revolution against our history, consistent with the whole of revolutionary progressive collectivism. So when I see it as consistent with all these things that I've read before, that I've come across before. It's nothing new. And the long train of world socialist, humanist rights-based assaults on God and our natural endowed by our Creator. You know, that's the other thing between civil rights, human rights of human civil origin versus our natural endowed by our Creator. I go over this in my book. But, you know, Dr. Martin Luther King called for civil rights. Was he calling for the civil recognition which our government was obligated to do by the Constitution, to recognize our natural, endowed by our Creator, individual rights and liberty civilly? Or the civil rights movement, was it about getting government to hold to the constitutional ordained, limited, enumerated powers? Or was it something different? Was it something that the whole civil rights movement was trying to do something different with a push of a collectivist version, like this guy here was right there, that convicts guy, you know, that Fabian socialist version of what American history is, where they go to the government and they say, you need to give rights to the people. We have to have rights granted to the people by government through the force of law, because that's the only way freedom can come. But that's what human rights are. That whole force to be free thing that goes back to the Rousseau's social contract from a collectivist perspective. Are they trying, is it a civil rights movement to force government to recognize civilly, as they are constitutionally bound to do, the natural and individual rights of all people, regardless of color, race, sex, gender, whatever, right? Or are they looking to have positive rights, additional rights, positive rights that have to be redistributed and come from government and distributed by government and redistributed by government? It's they're diabolically opposed concepts. That's what I'm getting at. Dr. Martin on with Shannon Joy. Okay, now he was on the Shannon Joy show. All right. I didn't even want to watch it, but I did. I was watching it, and at 26, this is the show here. Oh, see, that's it. At 26:20. At 26:20 in this video, Dr. Martin says that he started CCAM back in 1998. Quote, and my quotes might not be exact. I try to get them exact. I make mistakes, and I don't have any editing. I don't edit my videos, so it's just basically recorded live, and then I post them. So if I do make a mistake on here, like I said, and I said at the end of this thing too, is I want you to go back and I want you to watch these things and check the sources that I'm citing for these things. If I make a mistake, I make a mistake. But what I'm trying to get across is some information for your consideration here. Okay? And these are basically my notes from watching the video. And this is what I got. And I try to get these quotes as close as possible. But Dr. Martin says he started CCAM back in 1998, quote, as a means of looking at the way in which intangible assets, which are the only property rights granted by the Constitution. Now, do you see, after I just talked about the conversation that I just had with you about the difference between our natural individual rights and liberty and civil human rights from civil human origin? Right here, okay? He says he established the CCAM as a means of looking at the way in which intangible assets. Now, this guy's making global businesses in the field of intangible assets and intellectual property rights, patents and whatnot, right? Which are the only right, he says, only property rights granted, that's his word, granted by the Constitution. And granted by the Constitution. The only rights granted to the people under Article 1, Section 8, he said, is the right to your creativity, the right to your innovations. He uses that word, innovations, a lot. Now, innovations in history is, you come up with ideas, build the better mousetrap, and the world will be the path to your door kind of thing. But these innovation is taking a whole new concept within the revolutionary progressive collectivist revolution, the whole revolutionary progressive collectivism at large. It's taken on a whole new meaning, and that's basically innovations for change, not for, a competition in business, or innovation, or creation. You know what I mean? I don't know how he's using it here, but I'm just bringing that to your attention. I did a whole show on the innovation of collectivist revolution. Did a whole show. You want to check that out if that's a concept that's new to you or whatever. But yeah, he says it's the only rights granted to the people under Article 1, Section 8, which is, I don't know, isn't that powers of the enumerated powers of Congress? He's saying it's granting rights to the people. The only rights granted to the rights of the people under Article 1, Section 8 is the right to your creativity, the rights to your innovations, the right to your inventions, your copyrights, or what have you. It's the only property right granted to every citizen, he said. Let me see something here. I don't know why they got this tracking thing on this camera. Maybe it's freaking AI or some shit. I don't know. But anyways, I turned it off. Keep having to shut it off. But anyways, I got a point on that I want to make here in a minute. But my comment after no pushback, my comment after hearing that, Dave Martin say that on the Shannon Joy Show, a long-time champion of individual rights, individual liberty, our founding principles, our republic. For 10 years that I knew her before COVID, 10 or 12 years that I knew her before COVID, that's how I knew her. It's championing these things. But there was no pushback. She absolutely no pushback on that I heard. If she did push back on it, I didn't hear it. But I left a comment in the comments, which there was zero response, zero comment, no thumbs down or nothing on it. At 2620, Martin got it wrong. I put the U.S. Constitution doesn't grant any rights whatsoever. It only ordains the limited enumerated powers of government as a mere product of the natural individual rights and liberty of the people. Versus the Magna Carta, which was the government, the king, grudgingly being forced to acknowledge certain rights of certain people. Versus governments are endowed by governments are created by the people, deriving their just powers from the consent of the government, from the consent of the governed. It's the opposite. Government is a product of our liberty, not a permission given to us by government. Yet, he's going back to the Magna Carta version, the whole concept of a human rights version, a positive rights version. And he's saying that, so what I just said is that the U.S. Constitution doesn't grant any rights whatsoever. It only ordains the limited enumerated powers of government as a mere product of the natural individual rights and liberty of the people, from whom those limited powers are derived only upon their consent. But maybe he got our Constitution, liberty, and founding principles mixed up again with the Magna Carta and the Treaty of the Forest, right? With the more collectivist, world socialist, human rights friendly Magna Carta and Treaty of the Forest, which, I had gone over this before, where I show that human rights advocates use the Magna Carta and the Treaty of the Forest as the foundation, the first time that the origins of human rights, in which the limited rights of the people were grudgingly acknowledged by or granted by the king. And I went, see, this is what I'm saying. The Magna Carta, human rights, and the treaty of whatever that is. But, and this talk, Dr. Jones, whoever his name is, looks at how the originally a local document known as the Magna Carta went on to influence subsequent legislation in many countries, including international agreements such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I'm telling you. I'm not making this shit up. I'm not. But anyways, just another example. When he says that on the Shannon Joy Show, no less, no pushback, and it just goes. Only in the world socialism of human rights are intangible, or as it were, intellectual property rights, or any other right for that matter, granted by a government, and that's my point. Dr. David Martin is speaking from a purely collectivist, long-established collectivist perspective of where rights and liberty come from. Consistent with his as I've pointed out, his pretty consistent assault on American founding principles in America as founded, and the free enterprise upon which a free society can the free enterprise that enables a free society. Promoting the Magna Carta at its and its derivative, the Treaty of the Forest, as the OG be-all end-all of human achievement and liberty, as human rights history, doctrine, and advocates also do, is a common thread through Martin's work and advocacy that I've found of whatever he's actually advocating. What is he advocating? He doesn't actually come out and say it. A few times he says some things, but, you know, versus what he appears to be advocating. So what all those people in the crowds that are going to his presentations, what do they think he's advocating? What does Shannon Joy think he's advocating? When on her show, this guy is reinterpreting the Constitution, says that she's been a champion of in terms of the collectivist revolution that's targeted for destruction. Shannon Joy doesn't even push it back. I hope that she comes to and sees it, but maybe it's just semantics. You know, I'm antiquated. I'm an antiquated version of what our founding principles are. We need to get with it and get with society's new version of what it is, man. Come on, Joe. Get with it. The populist version of things. Well, just because it's popular doesn't make it right. You know? But I might be the only one left. The only one left out there who's clarifying these things. You know? I don't know. And there might be nobody left out there who actually gives a shit. But I don't know. At least I can sleep at night because I see this stuff. And if I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I didn't put this stuff together out there for at least your consideration. Our founding principles, our founding republic, our liberty, our individual liberty isn't this generation's or any generation's to surrender. It isn't any generation's, past, present, or future, to compromise or to sign away, because it belongs to posterity in perpetuity. You know, but that's just how I see things. So I'm trying to point it out for your consideration. You know, Dr. Martin also pushed his promotion of the Magna Carta and Treaty of the Forest on a show with postmodern New Age medical freedom world collectivist cult guru Sasha Stone. I go over the implicit anti-Americanism of his message in the first 25 minutes or so of the show I did a couple months back, and you can check that out here. This is the show. This is the show again with Sasha Stone and Jeffrey Sachs, the fuse proposal guy too, right? If you want to look into that a little bit more, you can check that show out. But I got this double star here where we go up here. And oh yeah, this is that treaty, the Human Rights Foundation, the Human Rights, how Magna Carta has become, it's referred to by human rights advocates, collectivist advocates, you know. See also 112.10 regarding why medical freedom movement has failed and what the real issue is. It's never been about COVID. It's been about biological weapons perpetrated by the United States on the United States for the purposes of suppression of liberty. In which limited rights of people were grudgingly acknowledged by the king. Okay, so I got double knot there. See also 112. why the medical freedom movement has failed, and what the real issue is. It's never been about COVID. It's been about biological weapons perpetrated by the United States and on the United States for the purposes of suppression of liberty. I can't remember what I was getting at for that. Let's see. 11210. Get by these commercials.
The Phoenician Scheme.
Help yourself to a hand grenade.
From director Wes Anderson, Zsa Zsa Corda, a controversial figure and the world's most fascinating man.
Break, but don't bend.
The Phoenician Scheme, rated PG-13, in select theaters in New York and Los Angeles, May 30th. In theaters everywhere, June 6th.
Sorry about the commercials.
Shannon Joy Show.
Live. Right? Isn't it a tragedy, but for example, that Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who is a very intelligent, very wise, and very thoughtful person, I have a huge amount of appreciation and respect for him. But isn't it a shame that he is now going on the chat circuits and the news circuits to try to force the China virus story when we know that even the Brownstone Institute and others are now coming clean on what I've been saying since 2002, which is this is the United States conducting biological weapons development in the United States.
Right.
Collaborating, yes, they are collaborating with foreign actors. But let's be really clear. And Jay Bhattacharya needs to address a very fundamental problem. In February of 2016, the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences unambiguously stated that, and I'm now quoting, the Wuhan Institute of Virology Virus 1, WIV1, was, quote, poised for human emergence. Now, does that sound like a lab leak in Wuhan, or does that sound like a manufactured weapon in the United States? Built.
Basically, again, as it was before, he's stirring up. He's doing two things. He's stirring up mistrust of our military, stirring up mistrust of our government, with an accusatory against America there, and in addition to pushing the whole virus narrative, pushing the gain of function narrative, right? That's just another point in that video that I saw. There's a lot of points, a lot of things. I only picked out a few things in these videos. I'm not listing everything here in this show of everything that he said that may or may not be anti-American. I'm just picking out a handful of these things as I'm going down through it and putting them on here. You know, it's just another point that he was making in that video, consistent with what he's doing in other places at any given opportunity to shit on America one way or another. You know, not to say that some of those things may or may not be true, that our government is doing things that are nefarious against our people. I got this other thing too. I think at one point in this show with Shannon Joy, I can't remember the exact number. It's like 237 or something similar to that effect, or in that neighborhood. He says that America. Wait a minute. He says that America has attacked its own people. Okay. Let me see if I can get this up here for you. Okay, you see that? Okay. America's attacked its own people through like experiments and all different kinds of shit, like 237 times. I don't know. I couldn't research that number. I didn't know where to start in the research number. I have no idea where he got that number. Okay, not that America hasn't done nefarious things to its people, but he, at every given opportunity, is putting America in that bad light. I don't know. Is he doing it by accident? Is he doing it because America is bad? Are we to understand our own country as nothing but bad? Well, if we're continually told what America is from the perspective of the revolution against it, that's all we're going to know. That's all I'm trying to say. And that's all I'm pointing out, is that the things that he's saying and laying out here as accusatories are very consistent with a long train of revolutionary progressive accusatories against America. That essentially, as I've said many times in things that I've been saying for probably past 10 or 15 years, is that much of the progressive collectivist accusatories against America are actually progressive policies, the end result of progressive policies and progressive ideology projected onto America as founded in America's founding principles. You know, and this is just another case here too. All these, I found this article here, and it says the dark history of how U.S. experiments on its own people. You've got like one of the famous ones is the Tuskegee experiment, which was done on black people, which is used a lot in critical theory. It's an electric bike or something that keeps going by here. The critical theory, critical race theory, critical curricula, critical pedagogy in schools. This is all the shit that our kids are being taught. It's the only thing that our kids are being taught is this critical race theory stuff, critical theory, which just comes out of a Marxist doctrine. It's all part of Marxist doctrine. I found this article is kind of going down through it. It was kind of cool. So they listed the dark history. And they list, of course, you know, they're going to say a considerable number of subjects in these studies were impoverished members of racial minorities, incarcerated individuals, and kind of thing. They just, you know, a few examples. Tuskegee experiment, 1932, the plutonium and testing. They did a lot of these different experiments. Operation Sea Spray, Operation this, Operation that, Project MK Ultra. Remember that one? Operating Big Itch, you know, Operation Big Buzz. No, Manhattan isn't in here, but they've got different ones. I don't know. Vaccines, measles experience, even in 1989. The Kaiser. There was a measles vaccine trial initiated by CDC and the Kaiser. Kaiser, I don't know if they're officially affiliated with the Kaiser Foundation or not, but they're all Kaiser. They're all progressives. And if you look down through this and you see this, and you'll see that most of these things are a result of progressive policies, progressive era policies, or progressive policies, progressive thought process, the progressive mindset. You know, so this is what I'm getting at here, and how just wanted to bring that up because he mentions that in Shannon Joy show. I didn't put it in these notes here, but I remembered that he had said that, and I had come across that article. So I just wanted to kind of show you that and bring that into the conversation too a little bit. Again, just another opportunity to shit on America, to put America in bad light, to put American government in bad light, to get the American people reason to mistrust and even hate their own government and their own country. It's what revolutionaries do. It's what revolutions do. Just want to, for your consideration. At 33:30, that Shannon Joy show, Dr. Martin quotes from page 3 of the 2024 National Blueprint for Biodefense. This document. Another hypothetical scenario, as he put it, Event 201 moment, he called it. Okay, highlighting the failures of the populist medical freedom movement, because he's out there calling out the whole he's calling out the medical freedom movement. Okay. Yeah, not including himself. Calling out the populist medical freedom movement, not including himself, or for that matter, the real Event 201, Event 101, which actually happened in 2018 as investigated by Mark Kulak, the Housatonic. He doesn't bring that in. This is at Housatonic. You can see it right there, Housatonic.live. The real Event 201 was in 2018. It was in 2018. All these people that were involved. Lee Min Yang, and he's got a lot of this investigation, but nobody's talking about that. Nobody ever mentions that. They refer to Event 201 as the OG Event 201. Well, it happened before that too. So, but anyways, I wanted to bring that to your attention so that you can be aware of it and check that out if you want. Compared to Dr. Martin's only right granted to James Madison in Federalist 43. Now, Federalist 43 is kind of an obscure, I guess, Federalist paper. I've read a lot of the Federalist Papers. This is a book, The Essential Federalist Papers. Doesn't even have Federalist 43 in it. So, but I looked up Federalist 43 because I've read it in other places, and it just kind of struck me a little bit here, too. It says, you go back to where he says on the Shannon Joyce show that the only right granted to the people by the Constitution, he says, is their intellectual property or intangible property, right? This is James Madison. Wasn't he the father of our Constitution? They say, well, maybe. I don't know what they call him now. But anyways, a power to promote the progress of science, okay? A power to promote the process of science and useful arts by securing for a limited time to the authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective rights and discoveries. He's not granting. The Constitution is not granting the people. It's a power to Congress to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing. They're outside the jurisdiction unless you can pass laws to protect them. Okay? The exclusive rights to their respective writings and discoveries. The utility of this power will scarcely be questioned. The copyright of the authors has been solemnly adjudged in Great Britain to be a right of common law. The right to useful invention seems with equal reason to belong to the inventors. The public good fully coincides in both cases with the claims of individuals. The states cannot separately make effectual provisions for either of the cases, and most of them have anticipated the decision of this point by laws passed at the instances of Congress. See, one of the reasons why they put that in the Constitution is because without, in the Articles of Confederation or whatever before that time, where there was no specific power of government in the absence of the federal Constitution, stipulating that it was outside the state's jurisdiction to make up their own laws on what they will protect and what property rights they will and won't protect, or will and won't secure. There's nothing in there about the Constitution granting anybody, citizens, anything other than ordaining limited powers. A power to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for a limited time to the author and inventors this exclusive right to their respective rights and discoveries, which, that limited time would be their lifetime, maybe. And I think they came up with something that's their lifetime plus 70 years. Now, when you get into federal funding and public funding that comes up with these patents that you're coming up with federal funding, and you're not doing it on your own, I don't know. Argument opens up, if you ask me. Just saying. But if you get to the point where the only way that you can ever come up with the money, if you've got businesses, the only way they can ever be in business is through government subsidies and colleges and academia, and they're getting, and the only this quote unquote innovation that's out there is through government subsidies, then I don't know. The argument opens up and people are left with no recourse to protect anything. And this is a free market and free enterprise and mom and pop shops that are actually exercising this free market principle. The only place that actually still exists is in the small mom and pop shops that they tried to kill with COVID when they locked everybody down, and it was the largest transfer of wealth from the private sector into these giant government subsidies like, Walmart, the internet companies, where you order everything on the internet, Amazon, you are locked up, and the only place that you could do is the only place they let you do business is with these giant freaking corporations that would deliver shit to your house. All right, with drones, they were hoping. Weird shit. But anyways, I got this double pound sign here, double number sign here about this Constitution. Martin saying that the only right granted by the Constitution. Okay, I got this double pound sign. I got another side note on that. Article 1, Section 8 has been said to be the, quote, foundation of intellectual property rights, have been thereby positively granted to every citizen, like all positive human civil rights, right? Like they are. Accordingly, as with those human rights, there must be a balance. This is the freaking word. I'm telling you right now. Balance, the word it's slave speak. Balance. Rights, responsibilities, balance. It's slave speak. Comes straight out of human rights-based collectivism, or the world socialism of human rights. Established, there must be a balance established between the right of the individual and the collective. Not just the balance between the individual's right and the individual's responsibilities, but between the rights of the individual and the rights of the collective of society. Society and or the humanity at large, basically, is where they're going. The human organism, okay? Per the World Socialism of the United Nations Agency, WIPO, or the World Intellectual Property Organization. So we're going to get into a little bit of what intellectual property rights are from the perspective of the World Socialism of the United States, the World Socialism of Human Rights, from which Dr. David Martin is coming from when he says that the Constitution, the only right granted by the Constitution is intellectual property rights or intangible rights, right? More on WIPO. I got WIPO here. The World Intellectual Property Rights Organization okay. We provide a policy forum to shape balanced international intellectual property rules for a changing world. For a changing world. Sound familiar? WIPO leads the development of a balanced and effective global intellectual property ecosystem to promote innovation and creativity for a better and more sustainable future. In just those few words, you're locked into the world socialism of human rights. You're locked in the paradigm of the world socialism of human rights. There's no way out here. The only way out is to see it from the perspective of our founding principles, from our endowed by our Creator, natural, unalienable, no lien can be put on our rights and liberty. They're endowed by our Creator. They're from nature or nature's God, one way or the other. They're outside the jurisdiction of the government, which is also a product of that liberty. Here, it's a totally different. It's totally different. The rights come from the government, and there's got to be a balance between any right that you get from the government and the rights of society at large. Okay. Intellectual property rights and human. This is also from WIPO. What we're getting at here. Let me see if I can find this. No, I don't know. I guess you got to download it. But anyways, from that WIPO intellectual property organization knowledge repository, publication 762, it says, in which human right and rights are mentioned some 572 times. Wait a minute now. This is it. I think this is it. Let me check this out. See what we get. It's counting the human right number. I just wanted to put that in there. It's counting how many times human rights is in there. I mean, come on, man. I counted 572 the last time. Wonder how many it gets this time. 573. 573. One must have popped up in there. But anyways, human rights are mentioned in there 572 times on the intellectual property rights by that WIPO, right? Intellectual property is mentioned 935 times. Intellectual property rights 935 times. And get this, the Human Genome Project is mentioned 17 times. The Human Genome Project? Everything's about the Human Genome Project, right? You listen to Dr. Jonathan Cooey, and he puts it out there. How important the Human Genome Project is to the whole concept of why the COVID pandemic. And the population of people, when you take into consideration the population pyramid and how people over 65 and people, the older generations, are making up more and exponentially more of a percentage of the population as the baby boomer bump in that population pyramid moves up into the over 65 age group, and all these people are going to die. And they've known about this, been writing about the crisis of the baby boom getting up there, right? And all these people are going to start dying. We're going to have an exponential increase, exponential increase in deaths. So if we can establish that natural exponential increase in deaths and stage it as some kind of a disease or a virus or a pandemic, and also, we can kill a few more people along the line. I don't know. It's kind of diabolical to think about. But all those things taken into consideration, the Human Genome Project, it's all, like Cooey says, it's all one big show. And what I say is that the strands of the revolution, the strands in the revolutionary web keep coming back around, keep coming back around. And here we are. Why would the Human Genomes Project be mentioned in anything 17 times? That's a document that you can look into right there. If you want to look up into that and tie that in, how human rights, the intellectual property rights, and the Human Genome Project are all tied in together through a United Nations organization. introduction. Okay, introduction. This paper proceeds from the experience of a legal practitioner. I don't see what the hell is going on here again. I gotta shut this freaking camera's bugging out on me again. Sorry about that. Yeah. But anyways, this paper proceeds from the experience of a legal practitioner under the intellectual property system of the USA, where a separate right to culture is not expressly recognized. In our Constitution, have a right to culture. But where the established principle of constitutional law balance individual ownership of rights with collective social rights. They're saying that the principles of constitutional law balance individual ownership of rights with collective social rights. No, that human rights law does that. But they're saying that this is happening in U.S. law. Okay? Constitutional law. Human rights laws have infiltrated our legal system. The world socialism of human rights law has implemented and implanted itself and taken root within our legal system. And what that does, as I've said before, human rights laws and the positive redistribution of rights, responsibilities of the government, okay, that those human rights law mandate government do. And the limited powers of the Constitution, the limiting powers of the Constitution as a binding document, they clash. The concepts clash, and they clash, and they clash. And the Constitution isn't winning because it isn't actually the Constitution that's the supreme law of the land under the progressive policies, progressive concept of judicial supremacy, which keeps interpreting the Constitution of the needs of today, not some world that is dead and gone. It's where we are. Our founding principles are gone, and I'm going to point this out too. But anyways, and there's going to be nobody out there pointing these things out. And I was just seeing a video today that popped up on Rumble today as I went on there. It was popped up. So they had some guy on there talking about American liberalism, and they had these books that they were recommending on American liberalism, talking about our founding principles, mentioning our founding principles, mentioning our founding, founders and all this and that and the other thing. Then they got this book where Steve Bannon wrote the foreword. A nationalist, a self-proclaimed nationalist populist. Well, if you're a nationalist, and Steve Bannon, in particular, in the whole nationalist populist right with the national conservatives, the neocons, any of them, none of them respect our founding principles. None of them respect our founding republic or the limited Constitution as described by Alexander Hamilton in Federalist 78. There's no concept of it. They've targeted it for destruction just as much as the world communists have, or anarchists. No less. They've targeted it for destruction no less than any other revolutionary collectivism. But anyways, intellectual property defined, okay, in this WIPO thing. The Constitution of the United States, of the USA, encourages cultural development and dissemination by promoting the progress of science and useful arts. Article 1, Section 8 delegates the power to Congress to grant copyright protection. Do you see what I'm saying? Dr. David Martin, when he says that Article 1, Section 8 delegates power to the Congress to grant copyright protection. The word grant is there, but they're to Congress to grant copyright protection. He used the word grant. Madison used the word secure. Congress and Martin takes it a step further from this and says that he's granting it to the people at least in this United Nations or WIPO NGO, I don't know what specifically, but it's a United Nations affiliated organization, delegate the power to Congress to grant copyright protection. And in the light of that, I've got this human rights perspective on the intellectual property, scientific progress, and access to the benefit of science. This is from research. This is a white paper, I believe. A human rights perspective on intellectual property, scientific progress, and an access to the benefits of science. Okay. UConn. Intellectual property regimes seek to balance, there's the word balance again, the moral and economic rights of creators. The morals, that word moral throws in there. From a collectivist perspective, there's a moral, the moral person, the whole person, which is responsibilities to the collective. Okay, and the moral person is altruistic. He lives for the sake of others. Goes back to Kant, Kantian freaking collectivism here. But intellectual property rights regimes seek to balance the moral and economic rights of creators and inventors with the wider intersects and needs of society. Do you see? This was written... When did she write that? 1999. This is back in 1999, so this is nothing new. A major justification for patents and copyrights is that incentives and rewards to inventors result in benefits for society. Again, we're coming for a justification from the perspective of the social contract, from the perspective of revolutionary progressive collectivism, in the context of comparing it to the old Constitution, which didn't protect any of these things. Okay? Allegedly. A human rights approach to intellectual property takes what is often an implicit balance. See, this is where I'm getting. They're saying it right here in black and white for you. A human rights approach to intellectual property takes what is often an implicit balance between the rights of the inventors and creators and the interest of a wider society within the intellectual property paradigms, and makes it far more explicit and exacting. Exactly. They're going to take the human rights, they're going to balance whatever right to property they're going to, like I did in the last show that I, before this David Martin shows, I showed in there how in the world socialism of human rights, how that collectivism breaks down. They take your right to property. And then they're going to break it down to intellectual property, tangible property, or intangible property, your right to property. Your natural, endowed by your creator, right to property. Okay? In fee simple, which is also in the Federalist Papers. Or by Federalists. But it's just Noah Webster. That's the guy who wrote on property. You want to look up the Federalist Noah Webster, and let me see. Noah Webster, I think, in defense of the American Constitution. Noah Webster, the Constitution defended where property isn't just the stream from which liberty flows, it's the fountain from which the stream of liberty flows. The right to private property is therefore the means of our defense of liberty. Defense of property is therefore the means of the defense of our liberty as a whole. Anyways, human rights collectivism, the world socialism of human rights context of property, they take it down, they dissect it into different levels which that socialism, that collectivism will possibly recognize certain aspects of it. Some are social rights which could be confiscated by the collective and redistributed to others. That they're gonna break it down into what would be respected the least and what would be disrespected the least. You know, because none of it's going to be left in whole by a collectivism, because they need to be able to confiscate and redistribute whatever the according to the needs of the planners, from each to each according to their needs, from each according to their abilities. So whatever you have that that's Marx straight, whatever you have that the planners need, they're going to take. The human rights approach to intellectual property takes what is often an implicit balance between the rights of the inventors and the creators and the interest of the wider society within intellectual property paradigms and makes it more explicit and exacting right. So you're not going to be able to wiggle out of it. The other thing is that in these, the concept of our rights being broken down in this world socialism of human rights, the whole legal protection, the constitutional protection of being able to hold the government to strict scrutiny when they violate our rights. And there's a couple shows ago that I did, I can't remember the title, but in the collectivism, world socialism of human rights, there is no holding the government to strict scrutiny. It's only held to the rational basis test, which means all they got to do is rationalize why they took it, according to the needs of the planners. Being held to strict scrutiny is something that comes down with your natural, endowed by your creator, individual rights and liberty. Yeah. And the limited powers of government, when you're looking at it from our founding, from a liberty perspective, from our constitutional republic perspective, our founding perspective, and our founding principles perspective, the government should be held to strict scrutiny. But human rights lawyers, a legal system that's viewing with a bar association that views everything from the perspective of human rights and the collectivism and the world socialism of human rights, you're not going to get that strict scrutiny. That's like my constitutional right, man. It's like having a constitutional right to keep and bear arms. Well, why do you have this gun? Because I have a constitutional right to keep and bear arms? Yeah, try that one in the court of law. See what happens. Same thing with strict scrutiny. It's gone by way of your constitutional right to keep and bear arms. As retired law enforcement under LOSA, Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act, you can qualify every year to be able to carry in all 50 states of our country as retired law enforcement. It recognizes active duty law enforcement when you leave the service, when you outside your jurisdiction, and including upon retirement. So you can qualify. You have to qualify every year, annually, just like we did when we were, like officers do every year, right? So, but the only reason why you can carry is because of an act of law. They're not recognizing the constitutional right to keep and bear arms. Do you see what I'm saying? Just that whole constitutional right to keep and bear arms is essentially gone unless it's established by some kind of state law in some state that says you have constitutional carry here. And then you got to be careful how the law is written, But strict scrutiny has gone by the same way from the perspective of the collectivism, because they don't allow it. It's the mindset that's taken over our whole legal system, the mindset that's taken over the people, that they just comply to that. Anyways, wanted to point that out. Dr. David Martin has been featured as a speaker at these WIPOs. I just wanted to point out what these WIPOs were. It kind of goes right down along it. Okay, with this world intellectual property rights, on the Shannon Joy show, he's saying it's the only right granted to people, actually, by the Constitution. You know that was your only right granted to you by the Constitution? Is intellectual property rights or intangible rights? Well, Dr. David Martin has been a featured speaker at this World Intellectual Property Rights organization. Through his business, MCAM CEO addresses WIPO Forum on the draft substantive patent law treaty in Geneva. This is back in 2006. This is right from, you can see that's the logo, is MCAM logo right there, 2006. Okay. Dr. David Martin, March 2, 2006. Okay. MCAM is a full-service intellectual property rights actuarial company dedicated to developing, enabling, and promoting uniform accountability and quality standards for the granting, use, and disposal of such rights in a global economy. The disposal of those rights in a global economy. From our pioneering work in creating the world's first standards based on innovation back in 2006, collateralization, financial products for banking and securities, to our work on the international grassroots innovator enablement, MCAM endeavors to balance the interests of the public and industrial development, supporting creativity to build thriving economies. Balance. That's that balance. That balance comes straight out of the human rights. I mean, is it a coincidence? Do you think, I didn't mean that. With everything else is consistent with it? I don't know. Maybe it's a coincidence, right? Also, what is an intangible asset according to MCAM? All right, he's got all these different things on here. What is global innovations commons? Basically, he's out there teaching governments and people on how to dive into the pool where intellectual property rights and patents have expired or been abandoned or some shit, where everybody can delve in and it's free access, dude, man. All right. But anyways, that's how he's making a lot of money doing that, I guess. What is an intangible asset according to MCAM? Intangible assets are those rights granted by social establishments. Another coincidence? Right? That are used to link innovation to finance and market controls in exchange for sharing useful knowledge or engaging in the effort to advance economic endeavors. National entities could award to innovators or prospectors limited time exclusionary rights. In science and technology, these rights come in the form of patents and trademarks. In art and literature, they are copyrights. In the industry, they are licenses. For example, spectrum of radio waves, use of certain resources like water, minerals, etc. These artifacts constitute innovation. Precipitated out of a common knowledge and condensed for a momentary, context-defined use in the agents around which value can be transacted. I'm going to break it all down into minutia. Becomes more exact, right? I don't know. You've from MCAM News Archives 2008 to 2005. MCAM CEO expands dialogue on integrating environmental technology into economic stimulus. Environmental technology from 2009. MCAM's Dr. David Martin has just released his report on the structural challenges, structural racism, structural systemic, all right, challenges facing policymakers and industries. And the structural challenge would be like a system that's a structural challenge to the whole collectivist revolution at large is our Constitution. That's a structural challenge. For facing policymakers and industries seek to integrate green technology into the current market. So he's pushing green technology, or he's pushing. He's just released a report on structural challenges facing policymakers and industries seeking to integrate green technology. Subsidized, because what green technologies weren't subsidized? When green meets gold, ooh, there's gold in that green, man. A call for integral wealth ethics. A call for integral wealth ethics in the climate and energy dialogue. Dr. David Martin, an executive chairman of MCAM fellow, Batten Institute, and a whole list of different things, okay? University of Virginia, October 10th, 2008. We're here again. Economic uncertainty, energy volatility, environmental stress, and a later day epiphany that something must be done. While the actors have new faces and the urgency has new fervor, something gnaws at our consciousness. White guilt, capitalist guilt, right? Haven't we been here before? Why didn't solutions emerge the last time? Who's to blame for getting us into this mess? Yeah, who's to blame? Yeah. First, some facts. Since the 1970s, over 30,000 patents have been issued around the world for innovations and inventions. Probably the only real use of the word innovations. I don't know. In fossil fuels, alternative energy technologies, including solar, photovoltaic, biomass, wind, tidal, geothermal, hydrogen, and fuel cells, to name a few. Major research institutions and corporations, including energy giants like Exxon, BP, Royal Dutch, Shell, ConocoPhillips, Chevron, Texaco, Total, Elf-Fina, have seen massive investments made in alternative energy, large proprietary estates amassed, only to have them slip anonymously into abandonment or expiration, having never fulfilled their commercial or social intent. So they're getting buried. I don't know. The public, but now that they have, why can't they? If are they in the public domain now? Oh, okay. So they slip into oblivion. Ironically, at precisely the moment when the world is reawakening to its inconvenient truth. Remember the inconvenient truth? Wasn't that Al Gore and some other guy? We're awakening to the inconvenient truth. So Dr. David Martin is pushing the inconvenient truth. How many conservatives were advocating and promoting the inconvenient truth when it was a thing? Right? Yeah, so now they're expired and in the public domain. That's a good thing. That's where they can capitalize now that they're in the public domain. But he's going to say, well, they were suppressed by all these big companies. But now they're in the public domain, leaving commercial interest and public policymakers in a puzzling state. And no one is sure why adoption of promising technologies didn't happen. Capitalists didn't want competition, right? Isn't that basically the go-to accusatory? However, this time is different in one important way, namely with the collapse of the financial markets, insurance, and institutional investments. Remember 2008, 2009 when Obama came in, everything just took a shit. The housing crisis, the housing bubble, all that, right? Which basically that snowball was started running. They started rolling that snowball over the cliff during the Carter administration under what was called the Community Investments Act, the Community Reinvestment Act. I think that's what they called it. So, anyways, but where everybody had a right to housing, human right, by the way, just like in prison. namely with the collapse of the financial markets, insurance, and institutional investment in particular, the real systemic obstacle can be identified and engaged. But anyways, Dr. David Martin speaking to these things, okay, back in 2009. Another MCAM to address the State World Forum in 2009. Washington, D.C. Hilton. This gathering is designed to catalyze innovative ideas, actions-oriented people, and enabling technologies required to shape constructive change. Addressing global warming. Highlighted solutions that already exist. Mobilizing cultural, creative, demographic, addressing global warming. I don't know what else. I screwed up that or something. 3, connecting the emergent population that understands the need for urgent and constructive change and the systemic nature of the changes needed with the innovators of enabling technologies that can implement those changes. The 2009 State of the World Forum will elevate awareness and connect need with innovative sources into a movement for global activism. For more information, then you go to this Next Now Collaboratory. This Next Now Collaboratory is there, and guess what we see? Cultural creatives, the R evolution. Remember, we went over Dr. David Martin did that whole video about the American R evolution. You know, he did that, I think it was 2015. And go back on that other video and look. But I just want, back then I said, remember that because it's not the first time it came up. This is where it comes from. You see what I'm saying? In the context of a movement for global activism, addressing global warming. This is Dr. David Martin's organization. You know? He says he's pushing back against the elite. He says he's pushing back against the central planners. He says he's fighting for the little guy. He says he's fighting for, America. Or at least that's what people say he says he's doing. Or understand what he's doing. So, but anyways, you can follow that link, okay? This is the link. Now, you can follow this. This is an original link off that article, okay? And he's got all these different links on here, and I kind of picked out a few of them here. You can follow that last original link to a number of Next Now collaboratories, world socialist initiatives, including the Universal Humanity of futurist Barbara Marx Hubbard. Now, Dr. David Martin lists himself as a futurist in his bio, or he has been listed as a futurist in bios of him. We're going to get to that in a minute, too. At the end of this, I'm going to go over his bio a little bit. Because who is this? Who is Dr. David Martin, right? But this is Visions of Humanity, Universal Humanity, revealing a positive future for humanity full of infinite possibilities. And that's Barbara Marx Hubbard. Yeah, Visions of a Universal Humanity featuring social innovation, and illuminary Barbara Marx Hubbard. I just want to point that out. Okay, and disciple of both Teilhard's Desjardins' Noosphere and fellow futurist Buckminster Fuller's Spaceship Earth and Global Village Harmony of its Green World campaign. They all tie in together. Barbara Marx Hubbard is a disciple of Buckminster Fuller and his Spaceship Earth, okay? kind of like One Earth. And in 1987, the Brundtland Report, which was written by Gro Harlem Brundtland and Maurice Strong, I believe, for the United Nations, One World, it basically was the originating document of what is today has become known as sustainable development. Came out of that whole One World concept, spaceship Earth, all that shit. But anyways, that's where we are, okay? So we've got this Green World campaign. Sorry, I didn't really kind of show it. There's a Green World campaign. Okay. Okay, Green World campaign has been cited by One Earth, the magazine of Natural Resources Defense Council, for its bold agenda to turn degrading lands green again, to raise the living standards of the rural poor, combat climate change, and create holistic ways to work for health of our shared biosphere and the harmony of our global village. Okay, this is a link to right out from Dr. David Martin's MCAN. Okay, that he says they're addressing global warming in this. They're pushing this shit. It's right there. Let me see. We've got the planetary consciousness of its global coherence initiative. Global coherence initiative. Yeah, global coherence initiative. Right there. Yeah. The augmented collective intelligence. The augmented collective intelligence of its program of the future, inspired by OG mouse inventor Douglas C. Engelbart. You know, they say, come on, man, really? Anyways, this camera's wigging out on me again, but anyways, yeah. So now we've got, just to follow this through, following the last original link to the number of now collaboratories, World Socialist Initiatives, including the Universal Humanity of futurist Barbara Marx Hubbard. Okay. The global village harmony of its Green World campaign, the planetary consciousness of its global coherence initiative, the augmented collective intelligence of its program of the future, inspired by OG mouse inventor Douglas C. Engelbart. See the segment of his mural below. Okay. This is the program of the future challenge. And I just kind of blew this up a little bit here for you to get a look at. Just, this is part of his mural. It's a big mural. I don't know. But see if you see anything familiar in this. Let me see if I can get this up here a little bit. I mean, augmenting the human intellect, raising the collective IQ. You've got the timeline up here over the years, shift from industrial age to the information age. You've got the dynamic media in here, knowledge workers, humanistic something, the global village, sustainable design. They got all these different things in here, you know. Summer of love. But anyways, I just wanted you to see that, just so that you could get a look at what it was, and also the our revolution of its cultural creatives, and I already showed you that, right? And that was right from the original, right straight from the original link, takes you right to that our revolution. Is it gonna go? See what happens here. It doesn't want to go now. Try one more time. There it is. Our revolution. Our evolution. You know, I don't know. Also, there's some more from MCAM here. Executive Chairman David Martin joins James Quillian and David Bollier in the globalization of the common good. In the Globalization for the Common Good 2009 Chicago Conference. MCAM Executive Chairman David Martin joins James Quillian and David Bollier. Bio links. I added these links to it. They weren't there. In the Globalization for the Common Good Chicago Conference. In the ongoing effort to discuss ways in which fundamental transformation can be manifested in the changing global market. Okay. And now down here it says MCAM is pioneering work for inheritable trusts. Inheritable trusts will be discussed along with the growing global interest in a more integral redefinition of value in the global community. Yeah, back in 2009. Yeah. And then in here I've got this note here. Not a one-time outlier. Dr. Martin has also is also a contributor to the anti-free market capitalism of world socialist David Bollinger's 2013 publication, The Wealth of the Commons: A World Beyond Markets and States. So anyways, he works, MCAN Executive Chairman Dr. David Martin. Dr. Martin joins James Quilligan? I don't know. Okay. And this guy, this is who Martin's associating with here. Began his career as a program evaluation supervisor with the United States Labor Department. He became a publicist and speechwriter for the Brant Palm Brundtland, Nair and Carlson Ramphel commissions from the United Nations. That Brundtland Commission, like I told you, is the one who came up with sustainable development, the world socialism of sustainable development, making presentations to committees at the United Nations, U.S. House of Representatives, UK House of the Commons, Council of Foreign Relations during the 1990s and 2000s. Quilligan was a manager and speechwriter for several NGOs, including the Brant 21 Forum, Center for Global Negotiations, Globalization for the Common Good, Global Marshall Plan, Commons Clusters at the United Nations Forum with the experience in energy value analysis. He became a monetary consultant for governments in South Africa. Blah, 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 blah. But anyways, you get an idea who that guy is. And this David Bollier. All right? David Bollier. He is the Schumacher Center Reinvesting the Commons Program Director. He's an activist blogger. He's written 9 books on the commons, including recent Free, Fair, not free, but the fair market and alive, the insurgent power of the commons, green governance, ecological survival, human rights in the commons, so he's a human rights advocate, okay? The co-author, by the commoners built a digital republic of their own, patterns of the commoning things, the wealth of the commons, a world beyond market and the state. Well, anyways, with that, you get an idea where that guy's coming from. The world socialism of human rights, the world collectivism, both of them, right? And as we've seen, Dr. David Martin's been espousing right along the same lines. You know, is this guy an American hero? Is this guy out there advancing our founding principles, defending our founding principles, defending our American Republic, defending our natural individual rights and liberty? Or is he working with the guys that in the elites that have targeted it for destruction, that are agents of the revolution targeting it for destruction? Like I said, it's not an outlier. It's not an outlier. It's not a one-time thing here. It says, Dr. Martin has also contributed to the anti-free market capitalist world socialist David Bollinger's 2013 publication, The Wealth and the Commons. Okay. There's that Wealth of the Commons. I'm going to... And that's just the cover of the book there. Okay. Dr. David Martin's contribution to that being Emancipating Innovations and Closures, the Global Innovation Commons. Dr. David Martin. Dr. David Martin. Okay. Which leads off with, quote, patents are represent a social contract about innovation. Honestly, if you've got an innovation and you get a patent out of it, that's probably an original use, of the word innovation. But patents represent a social contract about innovation. The public, via governments, grants limited term monopolies to entrepreneurs as a way of encouraging innovation. Now, he's talking about limited term monopolies. That word monopolies gets thrown in there. A lot monopolies in collectivist doctrine are affiliated with capitalism. They're just monopolies are a derivative of capitalism, when in reality actual monopolies are a derivative of government favoritism, of government subsidies, not the free market. Government partnerships, right? And the public reaps the new knowledge and market access to new technologies. The social contract to promote science and the useful arts has in fact done little to achieve that goal, which has instead been pursued mostly through public funding of academic researches and contracts with industrial enterprises. At best, patents have been a means to manage market scarcity and thereby profits. As a practical matter, they have been more useful as litigation weapons or tokens of individual achievement. So you have profits and individuals being thrown under the bus there. For decades, policymakers on both sides of the Atlantic have clung to the entirely unfounded axiom that proprietary instruments are necessary to stimulate innovation in financial and development. So it doesn't come from the people, private people. Clung to the entirely unfounded axiom that proprietary instruments are necessary. So, listen. You don't have to let the people have proprietary rights or the proprietors, entrepreneurs. Governments can probably do it on their own, man. They have pervaded the distorted notion that societies can generate the technological innovations that they need only by restricting the creative impulse of humanity at large, by restricting the impulse of the collective and hoarding them in proprietary forms, especially patents. So property rights are a means of hoarding, monopolizing technologies, and hoarding the profits. Made by those patents. It's an accusatory straight out of radical communist and anarchist doctrine. Straight out of it. Maybe it's just a coincidence, right? It could be just a coincidence, though, right? And that article closes with, given the paper, that the contribution to that anti-capitalist work, right? Given the magnitude of the challenge before humanity, our clarion call is to deploy and honor these innovation impulses, especially to seed environmentally constructive enterprises in the most marginal states. So therefore, the need for redistribution of wealth, redistributive justice, disparate impact against whatever. We can begin to imagine a world in which ecosystems, human interaction, and the value exchange bring dignity to the earth, facilitate collaborative engagement between people, and yield prosperity to every engaged person. Ironically, this opportunity arises from vast storehouses of patent-free innovations from decades ago, a hidden resource created by an unequal access to resources, a hidden resource created by unequal access to resources, unconsidered consequences, and asymmetric wealth and power distribution. Asymmetric, capitalism exploitive, man, and it leaves in its wake all these the downtrodden, right? I'll be right back. I'll be right. Minipi's got to go, but while I'm gone here, a hidden resource. Right. So if Dr. Martin is just another of a long and growing list of super lefty progressive globalist agents of change who have embedded themselves into the populist right, such a long train of abusers cannot be by mistake. So what's up, Doc? What's up, Doc? The 2013 TED Talk by Dr. Martin below could clue us in. I've got, let me see if I've got that up here ready to go. No, I don't. I'm gonna 8:20 to 15:12. Okay,
How do you know when it's time to end a relationship or when to really fight for it to see if there's something there?
I don't think there's a right or wrong answer.
And the illusion is that if we're smart enough to discern a problem, somewhere out in the universe there must be a solution. But the problem with that myth, and the problem with that story, and the problem with the social systems that we build with those myths and those stories is we're missing the utility of the fulcrum. It turns out that without a fulcrum, Archimedes couldn't do a thing. And it turns out that if you study fulcrums in systems, you learn something very important. First of all, the bigger the obstacle, the bigger the challenge, the bigger that intractable impossible that we've heard so much about, the closer to that thing you need to get to effectuate the greatest change. Think about how a fulcrum works. If I move the fulcrum close to where I push all my pressure, and the object that I'm trying to move is way far away, I have to exert an enormous amount of pressure and I don't move the object. But if I can scooch that fulcrum over and get it right next to the object, and then I can go way, way back. At the end of my lever, I can push on the lever and the object tilts. Isn't it beautiful to realize that the way you solve the impossible, the intractable, the unassailable, the absolutely never can solve that problem is by embedding yourself as close to it as possible? Chris Uma is the head of the Mikamui Defense Force. The Mikamui Defense Force has continued conflict since 1989. And the United Nations, because the United Nations is a great lever organization, has decided to
Yeah, I wanted you to hear that. If we're going to get an idea where Dr. David Martin is coming from, I'm trying to figure out where he's coming from. And I saw that video and I said, is that what he's doing? It's just a question. Is that what he's doing? Because it explains a lot. His whole fulcrum thing, embedding yourself in as close to whatever it is that you want to affect change in. It's literally right there. And he's embedded himself into the would be the medical freedom movement. The medical freedom movement is doing the same thing. All these guys are doing the same thing. It's not just Dr. David Martin. They've embedded themselves into what would be the opposition to all the central planning. So you've got a limited spectrum opposition, and then if you embed that fulcrum, the closer you get that fulcrum, and you can embed that fulcrum right into whatever it is you want to affect change on, then you can do it. That's how you do it. Is that what they're doing? For your consideration. So who is Dr. David Martin? This is what I'm getting at here too. Who is he? He's the founder, CEO of MCAM International, and from here, all right. This is CNBC. They got a bio on him there, and out of that, OECD. He says the founder of the chairman of MCAM, Dr. Martin, has served with the senior advisor for over 128 countries throughout the OECD on matters of finance, trade, and technology procurement, as well as working with Allied Intelligence Operations for 30 years. Allied Intelligence Operations. As a fulcrum? I don't know. Just asking. He has served as the senior advisor for over 128 countries. Is this guy, who's he fighting for? Who's he arguing for? What's the motivation as a fulcrum embedded into the, resistance movement, I guess, if you will, or alleged resistance movement in the medical freedom movement, right? What are any of these guys doing? In this OECD, he's worked as an advisor for 128 countries throughout the OECD, and the OECD is an official UN observer advocate of the human rights. The OECD guidelines on human rights. As your human rights, like the rights to health, housing, food security, life, and freedom of speech and assembly being harmed because of business, are they being harmed because of business activity? The OECD guidelines may help your human rights to be respected by companies. I don't know. With Allied Intelligence, this is who he's part of, is this big, the elite of the elite, right? And this is his own bio from his own website. David Martin, about David Martin, by David Martin, at davidmartin.world. Okay? Dr. David Martin. He's chairman of MCAM, the international leader in innovation finance. Okay? Trade intangible assets. Okay, because that's his business. Now we know why, but the intangible property, intangible assets, which would be intellectual property rights, that's his business. But that's the only right that the Constitution has granted us. He's a developer of the first innovation-based quantitative index, the public equities, and is the managing partner of the Purple Bridge Funds. I didn't look into that. He is the creator of the world's first quantitative public equity index, the CNBC IQ 100 powered by MCAM, actively engaged in the global ethical economic development. Dr. Martin's work includes financial engineering and investment, public speaking, writing, and providing financial advisory services to the majority of countries in the world. To a majority of countries in the world. Who's he working for? Who's he out there doing all these things for? Is it us? Is it America as founded? Is it our founding republic, our founding principles, the free society of the little guy, us little guys? You know? Yeah. Dr. Martin is the architect and founder of the Global Innovations Commons. And is the author of the international legal framework of the Heritable Knowledge Trust and Heritable Innovation Trust programs. I didn't look into them either. He has pioneered global programs to bring corporate and stock market transparency to multinational extractive industries and multiple national extractive industries. I don't know what they're extracting, and has been instrumental in repatriating value to countries which have been subjects to corporate and financial abuses. Okay. His work on ethical engagement and stewardship of community and commons-based value interest is at the forefront of global financial innovation. This bio is he selling himself to us as defenders of individual rights and liberties, defenders of the individual, defenders of our founding principles, defenders of a limited government, defenders of a free market, of proprietors and entrepreneurs with property rights? Or is he working on behalf of all these people that he's making all his millions from, or whatever he's making? You know, is this the well that he's protecting? You know what I mean? That he's out there advocating. If that whole global world government, giant corporations, the public-private partnerships, and central planning society, central planned economy, global economy, that's extracting, that's pushing the innovation of confiscating the rights of the individuals so that for the benefit of the common good and global economy. Is he doing that for our benefit, or is he doing that for his benefit? To get the more people he can get to sign on to this, whatever he's pushing, is going to benefit him hugely, and at their own expense, at the expense of their own liberty. All those people and all those crowds, is that what he's doing? Because Sasha Stone, that he's affiliated with, that's what he's doing. Getting people to sign over all their property so that he can give them back whatever it says that he wants to do in Tennessee, his New Earth projects and stuff. I went over that in a couple of my videos that I did on him. Just asking. Just putting it out there for your consideration. Okay. Yeah, his work on ethical engagement and stewardship of community and commons-based value. That's right out of progressive collectivist doctrine, revolutionary collectivist doctrine, straight out of that. Just put very nicely, Commons-based value interest at the forefront of global financial innovation. Dr. Martin is a Batten Fellow at the University of Virginia's Darden Graduate School of Business Administration. Academic elite, right? I mean, look at his bio. How many pages long is it, damn? You know, he served as a chair of economics innovation for the United Nations affiliated intergovernmental renewable energy organization and has served as an advisor to numerous central banks, global economic forums, the World Bank, and international finance corporations and national governments. Where do his interests lie? Or have they lied? With the people, with the rights of the people, the individual rights, liberty of the people, and limited government and free enterprise. And is he fighting for those things here, or is he fighting for his bread and butter, which are the United Nations affiliated intergovernment government? While he's pushing back, he says he's pushing back against the central planning elite. Or at least putting it out there. That's how people understand it. He's pushing back against all this, you know. Meanwhile, this is his bread and butter. While he's shitting on America's actual founding principles and the foundations of our individual rights and liberty. So who is this guy, right? This is from him. This is his bio. He served as a chair of economic innovations for the UN-affiliated intergovernmental renewable energy organizations. Renewable energy, that's your climate, your global warming, your climate change, your green economy. Where in that is our fundamental individual rights and liberty going to be preserved? If that's who he's working for and working with. I mean, I don't know. Spokesman for global financial and intangible asset accountability and quality reform, Dr. Martin has worked closely with the United States Congress and numerous trade and financial regulatory agencies in the United States, Europe, and Asia. I don't know. Wouldn't that put him in and among the elite of the elite? That he's out there basically consulting for these people? That these people are hiring him, and he's working for these people to establish whatever they're doing, whatever they're implementing. You know. And Asia, in advocating and deploying infrastructure to support growing reliance on contract and propriety rights in business transactions. To support growing reliance on contract and propriety rights in business transactions. Well, just earlier we see that he was pushing against proprietary rights. So I don't know. Under the leadership of Dr. Martin MCAM, has supported the modernization of banking. The modernization of banking. There's a lot of things that are happening with that, including, digital currency, right? Programmable digital currency. Intangible assets, tax and accounting laws through its work with oversight agencies, with oversight agencies and policymakers, politicians. Dr. Martin has founded several not-for-profit companies, several for-profit and not-for-profit companies, and organizations, and serves on several boards. He was a co-chair of the ADC Australia Davos Connection, Forum's Leadership Retreat and Critical Infrastructure and Cybersecurity Councils. Again, where do his interests lie here? His bread and butter is with the elite of the elite. Why would and we think that he's pushing back against that? To fight for our individual rights and liberty, for the free people in a free society? Just a question. He was a founding director of Melbourne Center for Applied Innovation. I never looked them up. He served as a chairman and CEO of eSurface. I never looked them up. He was the founding CEO of Mosaic Technologies Incorporated, a company that developed the commercialized technologies in advance of computational linguistics. Computational linguistics. He's a linguist, right? Dynamic data comprehension and encryptic electrical field transmission, medical diagnostics, and stealth and choice. He was a founding member of Japan's Institute for Interface Science and Technology. You get the gist of that one, right? So he's working with the elite of the elite on a global scale. Where do his interests lie? As he's shitting on America as founded, as he's shitting on the foundations upon which are the history and the foundations upon which our founding principles were deciphered by our founders. Just a question. He founded and served as an executive director of the Charlottesville Venture Group. He has served as a board member for the Research Institution for Small and Emerging Businesses, the Academy of Augmenting Grassroots Technology Innovations in India, Charlottesville Regional Chamber of Commerce, and the Charlottesville Industrial Development Agency, Humanitad. That's the Sasha Stone organization that came out of Jeffrey Sachs and Sasha Stone working to push their millennial development goals that became the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Yeah. He served as a board member of that, is what it's saying here. The Global Urban Development and many other agencies dedicated to ethical human development as international policy contributor, economist, and futurist. She's a futurist, like Barbara Marx Hubbard was a futurist, like Buckminster Fuller was a futurist, right? The Global Urban Development. I just wanted to show you what these guys are. This guy was a board member of this, I think, or affiliated with it in some capacity, some leadership capacity, right? Let me see. About Us. Global Urban Development is a worldwide nonprofit organization founded in 2001. We conduct education, research, and action to promote policy ideas that help generate more prosperous, sustainable, and inclusive urban development throughout the world. Oh, that's nice. To further these goals, we engage in projects in partnership with a wide variety of international, national, city, and community organizations under the majority of themes of sustainability, prosperity, innovation, and inclusiveness. And so you're starting to get the idea of who these guys are. Yeah. They the second idea is that all people and communities have much more in common than the difference between us. Thus, we do not divide the world into irreconcilable differences. This explains why GUD works very closely with the UN on several different initiatives, including the Community Productivity Project in partnership with the United Nations Development Program, the United Nations Human Settlements Program, UN Habitat, and Shack Slum Dwellers International, designed to make significant progresses in researching, identifying new and better ways to reach UN's Millennium Development Goals. In researching and identifying new ways to reach UN's millennial development goals related to environmental sustainability, poverty reduction, gender equality, public health, and global development partnerships. You need to read it anymore. Again, those millennial development goals were established by Sasha Stone and Jeffrey Sachs, out of which Humanitad came. Dr. Martin is affiliating himself here in his own bio of himself. I'm not making this shit up. I'm not seeing things, you know. It's there for your consideration. Just pointing it out. Dr. Martin has closely advised innovation-based finance and investment program. By the way, those links were, I don't think they're original. I put them in there so that I could point them things out to you, what they were. Dr. Martin has closely advised innovation-based finances and investment programs in India, Bermuda, Brazil, China, Denmark, the European Union, United Kingdom, South Africa, and the Islamic Republic of Iran, and a whole slew of countries right here, right? His work has been subject of two internationally awarded documentaries, Patent Wars, which highlights his work on reform of global innovation systems, and Future Dreaming, a conversation with David Martin, which is a dialogue about humanity and its optional interaction in the universe. He has spoken at the United Nations General Assembly on citizen-led peacemaking initiatives and has been featured in Bloomberg Television, HBO's Last Week Tonight, John Oliver, and a speaker, author, business executive, and futurist again. Dr. Martin's work has been engaged in every country on Earth. So, is it to his benefit? Who's he actually working for? This whole string of elites that he's listed, that where his bread and butter is. He's flying all over the world for all these meetings. He's in America. He's all over America. He's in Europe. He's in Canada. You know, where they just had a truth thing up there that was promoted by Matthew Ert that they postponed until David Martin could be there. All right. Recently. But, I mean, has he embedded himself into the medical freedom movement as a fulcrum in order to move that, to get more people to join in the system that's giving all these elite the power that is his bread and butter? Just a question. Maybe I got it all wrong. Maybe the guy is fighting for our founding principles. Maybe the guy is fighting for our individual rights and liberty and for our free society, for us to be rid of all the people that is his bread and butter. Maybe that's it. Yeah, I think maybe that's it, right? 200 years ago, almost to the day, really, almost to the year, came the first wave of a welcome attack on American values. This is where I'm getting at. I'm going to kind of wrap this up. It came a welcome attack on American values in the form of a number of variations of collectivism. A welcome attack on American values, how the doctrines of Robert Owen attracted American society. Now, earlier, or in the first part of the show, I kind of compared the first show, part one of this kind of a dive into the collectivism of Dr. David Martin. I kind of showed you in the comparison on what Dr. David Martin was saying to the transcendentalism, pre-Marxian socialism of the early progressive era transcendentalists, and the utopian socialism of those guys. One of them was Robert Owen, or his son Robert Dale Owen, right? But here again, back in 2007, this article was written, this paper was written, okay? And it's a welcome attack on American values, how the doctrines of Robert Owen attracted American society. Again, I'm seeing how Dr. David Martin, in his popularity and the populist acceptance of his attack on American values, it's there. It's what it is. from my observation. I'm just putting out there for your consideration. But it's not the first time in history that this has happened. And this lady wrote this, or Elizabeth, Johnson wrote this back in 2007, where she was kind of seeing the same thing back then. She was going over, how did this assault on American values become so popular in America back in the early 1800s? And I got a little bit here that I wanted to go down through from. That's a pretty long article, but I got a little bit here that I want to go over on that, just to give you an idea where we're coming from. In the abstract, November of 1824, Robert Owen came to the United States with the intention of putting his beliefs about society into practice. He had done so once before in the new system of society that he had created at a new Lanark, a site of a textile factory that he owned, in which he singled out individualism, competition, and selfishness as the source of social evil. Right? The prescribed cure was an improvement of their environment, green economy, right? And circumstances which Owen believed to be the true determinants of a person's character. The experiment was considered a great success and served as an international model. The perception of a man's character as being determined by his cultural surroundings was shared by many Americans at the time, as evidenced by the popularity of various reform movements. Medical freedom movement, is that a reform movement? Is it a populist reform movement? Does it reflect actual founding principles, or does it reflect the collectivist mindset that the American public now has? That's where I'm going. We're ripe for the picking here. We're ripe for the picking of these academic elite vanguards of the revolution against us. So now that we've acquired over 150 years or 200 years now, the American public has acquired the collectivist mindset of itself even. And that's why you get what Antonio Gramsci referred to as spontaneous consent, when ordered to comply to the central planning of the collective with a collectivist mindset. Well, you just spontaneously consent to the order and comply. That's what you do, and that's what's happening. We've lost our rugged individualist mindset, our liberty mindset, our founding principles mindset. There's still a few of us out here left. Less and less every day. And I might very well be the last one out there trying to reach through the curtain of the cult to at least, because, my message isn't for the cult. It's for the people that are seeking to get out, or better yet, avoid it altogether. There isn't anybody in the cult that's going to like what I'm saying here, or what I'm doing, pointing out the world socialism, the world collectivist foundation fundamentals of what Dr. David Martin is espousing out there, or with any of the other medical freedom doctors and lawyers are espousing out there. Not going to like it. But that's why I started my show, The Liberty Perspective, to give you an opportunity to see what's going on, and for your consideration, because really I can do nothing else. I can do nothing else. I'm doing what I can. That's all I'm trying to do. But yeah, so this perception of man's character as being determined by his cultural surroundings was shared by many Americans at the time, as evidence of the popularity of the various reform movements. See what I'm saying? As evidence of the popularity of Dr. David Martin. With the intention of recreating a society like the one he had engineered before Owen purchased the Indiana village of Harmony from the religious sect, Rappites or whatever, that inhabited it. rechristened it New Harmony and issued an open invitation to all people to join his communitarian experiment. The excitement that ensued around the country was almost palatable as Owen, this is in the early 1800s, the excitement that ensued around the country was almost palatable as Owen embarked on a massive promotional tour of his adventure. He met privately with former presidents. He recruited new members in Philadelphia, and he lectured in front of numerous statesmen proclaiming the glories of his new system of society. So he had the attention of our elected officials. He had the attention of government. He had the attention of, it was a populist, almost populist movement. A speech delivered at New Harmony, Indiana by Owen on the 4th of July of 1826, entitled A Declaration of Mental Independence, provides an excellent example of how some of Owen's beliefs were out of step with the fundamental American values. He attacked concepts so ingrained into American way of life that even in the modern era, an attack on them would be seen as nothing less than an attack on our entire system of society. That was back in 2007 when she wrote that, right? How about today? Would they still be seen that way? Are they being seen that way? When the patriotic right has embraced the same people doing the same thing, espousing anti-Americans or an anti-American value, they're assaulting American values, our founding principles, to cheering crowds. And people like Shannon Joy give these guys a platform and think that they're promoting this because they think they're promoting the same thing, that they're promoting our founding principles, that they're somehow gonna, I don't know. Why? What is that doing to the benefit of our society, to the benefit of our founding principles, to the benefit of our founding republic, to our individual rights and liberty? Just a question. With this New Harmony thing and this whole declaration of mental independence, I told you before, in there they identify what they refer to as the Hydra of Evils: God, property, God, marriage, religion, marriage, and property, which is the same thing as God, family, and capitalism. Same shit. And he said that, he says, I now declare, in that Declaration of Mental Independence, I now declare to you in the world that the man up to this hour has been all parts of the earth a slave to the trinity of the most monstrous evils that could be combined to inflict mental and physical evil upon the whole race. I refer to private and or individual property, absurd and irrational systems of religion, and marriage founded on the individual property combined with some one of these irrational systems of religion. The monstrous evils of private property, religion, and marriage as a combination of previous two were certainly not among the things the vast majority of reformers wish to change in their quest to make the United States a shining example of a perfectibility of man, society, and the world. And yet, at least initially, Owen's doctrine inspired excitement rather than outrage. This is where we are today. Only we have a monstrably less significant amount of the population left that has any concept of what American founding principles are. I mean, do we? Where are our defenders of liberty? Where are our defenders of our republic pushing back against this shit? Standing in defense of America as founding, standing in defense of America's founding principles, standing in defense of our natural endowed by our Creator, unalienable individual rights and liberty, free enterprise, free market capitalism. Is there anybody left with the wherewithal to stand in defense of them, that know what they are, that know what the collectivism is that's targeted for destruction and be able to decipher between the difference. Is there anybody out there? To all Americans in the world, is there anybody out there? It's where we are. But anyways, in spite of his radicalism, Americans accepted, or at least were willing to listen to Owen's ideas because of his charisma. If there's anything that Dr. David Martin is absent of, if there's anything that he's absent of, it sure as hell isn't charisma. You know, he's like a motivational. You go to one of these motivational guru type freaking things, man. He's got that, man. He's all over. He's like got this motivational thing. He's pointing things out. Only I've told you this. Only here on the Shannon Joy Show is your listeners going to hear what I got to say here, or show you this document here, or over and over and over again. Really? I don't know. Their search for a way to avoid the perceived failures of their European counterparts and the pervasiveness of reform ideals in that period in American history. Ultimately, Owen has met with general approval because of the way his beliefs were in sync with the larger populist movements taking place in the United States in that era. And that's exactly the same the way it is with Dr. David Martin is espousing this shit. The larger medical freedom movement is espousing this shit. And we got defenders of liberty out there who have thrown the liberty under the bus. It started with Rush Limbaugh. It started with Glenn Beck, Mark Levin, the big talkers. They're going to throw it under the bus to give the progressivism of Trump in 2016, to give the progressivism of Trump a pass because he had an R in front of his name. At the time, I think he was a Democrat in New York City before that. But just saying. It's the same shit happening over and over and over again. The era of Reagan is over. Whatever, right? The era of our founding principles is over. The era of our founding republic is over. The era of our Constitution is over. Or so we are to believe, right? Is that where we are? Just a question for your consideration. One of the greatest testaments to Owen's influence and acceptance in the United States was the fact that he was granted the use of the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C. to deliver two speeches. Governments. Okay. The first on February 1825, and the second on March 7th of the same year. Both speeches lasted 3 hours, and the audience listened with great attention and respect. In these addresses, Owen summarized his career and experiences at his new Lanark or whatever, where he insisted that the citizens had been hopeless and demoralized until his system transformed them, until socialism, collectivism transformed them, man. Now he proclaimed he was prepared to likewise transform the village of New Harmony and issue an open invitation to all Americans to join him in Indiana. Owen also met with 3 former presidents, Adams, Jefferson, and Madison, all of whom, according to Owen, acknowledged that his principles were correct, which is bullshit. There's no way Jefferson, Madison, and Adams were going to say that his collectivism was correct. They're just everything that they put into our founding principles was to counter that mindset. In the now expanding populism of the same collectivism intrinsic to the populist nationalist right and the medical freedom movement, including quote unquote freedom, right? Being not so covertly espoused by the intelligentsia of MAGA, and the medical freedom movement at large, including, as we have just seen, by the ever popular Dr. David Martin himself. Is history repeating itself? Is history repeating itself? And this is where we're at. This is where we're at. Just wanted to show you what Dr. David Martin is putting out there on show after show after show, on patriotic show after conservative show. I wanted you to see it in the context of the revolutionary collectivist doctrine from which it's being espoused, from which it comes, wittingly or unwittingly. If you want to give them the benefit of the doubt, wittingly or unwittingly. But I don't think you can make that. You can't make that many mistakes if he's doing it by mistake. Either he's inept in understanding the doctrine that he's espousing, if you want to believe that Dr. David Martin could be inept. The guy's obviously brilliant. Okay? If you want to give him that, but you want to give him that wittingly or unwittingly, he's espousing doctrine wholly consistent with radical, anarchist, communist, humanist, radical revolutionary collectivist doctrine, whatever form. I mean, there's a million collectivisms, but the one thing that they have in common is that they're collectivism. You know, there is no lesser evil when you get to choose between two collectivism, and you're choosing between nationalism and communism, or anarchism and humanism, or, you know, nationalism. They say that there's got to be a lesser of two evils, but from a liberty perspective, they're both the same evil, collectivism. You see what I'm saying? I hope you got something out of this. I hope, you just take this stuff into consideration, digest it slowly, go over it and check out my sources, check out what I'm doing, double check my work. I dive into this because I see this as this popularity of this anti-Americanism, this attack as it was back in the early 1800s, and that lady wrote about, and she called it a welcome attack on American values. We're seeing the same shit again. And it's everywhere. And the medical freedom movement and Dr. David Martin are the welcome attack on American values today. Thank you for stopping by the Liberty Perspective. Again, I hope you got something out of it, and I look forward to, I don't know, it might be a while before I put up another show. I mean, put a lot of work into these last two shows. I got some ideas coming up, and it's a kind of a busy season now for me, but I'll try and get back and put something up. Again, thanks for stopping by, and I look forward to seeing you on the next Liberty Perspective.